Okay, so down here you can see we had different things done on different levels. And at this level, you can see out there and actually around here, the construction of the basement wall is cinder block. And so before this grey stuff was put on, everything was actually cinder block. It was reasonably okay, but it wasn't great. So what you can see here, and actually that is the insulating. It's a blown foam insulation. And the grey stuff on top is just a fire retardant. So we've had this sprayed over everything. The headers didn't get any special treatment. That was, I wasn't here at the time, that didn't happen for some reason. But we got all of the walls insulated, except we have a little cupboard in here that's got lots of shelving, and it was just going to be too much work to take out the shelving and do the whole insulation in there. So there is this small corner that is still reasonably cool for keeping our potatoes in winter. But other than that, we've got the insulation around the whole exterior wall, and it overlaps a little with the interior wall between us and our neighbours, and goes all the way down to the floor and all the way up into the rafters there.
How thick
Gemma,
is it,
quick
Gemma?
question. How long of the process was it to have the basement done?
If you're talking about how long it took the guys,
Franklin.
several. Yeah. There was one day, and then they had to come back and put the grey stuff on afterwards. So it was one day for the blown insulation, and then another day. But it was quite messy, and it involved a whole lot more work for me, because we had to move everything away 2 feet away from the walls in order to allow everybody space to get the work done.
And how would you say that there was a significant increase in comfort in the house? Because I mean, I'm just we actually Jane Thompson, the architect we talked about, who built our sunroom. The reason we met Franklin was because I enrolled us in a research project that Jane had with CMHC, looking at sustainability and giving us tips for improving our houses and etc., etc., etc.
Are there any chemical sensitivity issues with this foam stuff, and has that been tested, do you know?
That
24 hours, it's supposed to completely off-gas within 24
Yeah?
hours.
it's certainly, we've not had any odour problems. The stuff underneath, it off-gases a little, I think that's right, isn't it? The sprayed insulation, actually insulating, that gives off a little something when it's curing.
Yes, for 24 hours.
For 20, yeah, he said for 20.
And then the grey stuff is water-based.
Yeah.
That was a bit messy,
but gypsum coating,
so that basically should have nothing emitting from it at all.
No.
How thick is the foam?
It's 2 inches here in this job.
Oh,
So that'd be about an R10 insulation?
Well, R12 to 14, yeah.
Well, is it okay?
Actually, yes, in your report you said R12 to 14.
Yeah.
Did you have to do anything on the outside before you did the inside? Like you didn't have to dig around the foundation, or?
No, my understanding is that, this is a recommended. It's recommended by engineers. This is a method for doing houses. The sprayed insulation, the foam, the sprayed foam, that forms a proper air and water barrier, does it not, Franklin? So that you don't actually need to
dig on the outside.
Take on the outside while you're doing that.
Okay, I need to talk to somebody.
Foundation, because if you have a rubble foundation, then the recommended way is to actually go from the outside instead of the inside, because it's concrete block, or is it concrete?
It's cinder block on
cinder block on the inside. Then it's fine
I beg your pardon. That wall was actually concrete.
Yeah.
Cinder block in the middle, but that exterior wall was concrete.
So if it's concrete, then you can insulate from the inside. But if it's a rubble foundation, if you have those big sort of field stones and the other sort of mortar, the old school mortar, then it's recommended to insulate from the outside, simply because the mortar inside the joints is still sort of like water permeable, but there's still water inside of it, so if it freezes, then it can expand and crack. So it can lead to major structural issues if you have a rubble foundation. 80% of the time, you can insulate from the inside of your house, it's not a problem. But if you have rubble foundation, then the correct way is to insulate from the outside.
You need to check your weeping tile, I suppose,
you.
right?
I learned
Like,
something
make sure
new.
your weeping tile is working properly, because no matter what the foundation is, I would think that if your weeping tile isn't working, you'll get problems, which is another issue.
Experience water problems. Well, the thing is with spray foam, if you have spray foam, it's going to create this this pretty airtight and watertight sort of cover. So that's going to help. I mean, realistically speaking, though, if you have like major water issues in your basement, you probably want to, deal with those first before you insulate.
Yes.
But the spray foam will sort of help a little bit with sort of reducing the amount of, if it's just a small little crack, you might be able to get away with it. But at the same time, any sort of structural problem you want to deal with first before you insulate.
How durable
we
is it?
had not had any...
Spray foam?
The gypsum. Sorry, John.
I was going to say, we'd only had one water coming in problem underneath the sink there, and we had that fixed when the sunroom was built. Other than that, round all the other walls, we didn't see, and I kept an eye out because I used to work in mold remediation, so I'm kind of sensitive to these things.
Well, I noticed it's quite comfortable down
Yes,
there.
it
So.
is.
Yeah, actually, if we keep the furnace door opened, it's perfectly warm down here, no
Great.
problem without any extra source of heat.
Good.
And Jim, your question?
How durable is the gypsum coating?
The gypsum coating is pretty durable. I mean, I'm not entirely
Kids
sure.
playing ball in the basement won't hurt.
I think that
it's,
might
it's
be
pretty
a problem.
solid. But I mean, like, you don't want to be, swinging hockey sticks at it.
No,
but it's
not going to flake off or chip off.
No, it's not going to flake off, and you can probably go feel it, and you'll feel that it's pretty solid and it's sealed
Okay,
to the bone.
so you can get close to it there, you can get close to it here,
Yeah.
you can get close to it in the furnace room as well if you want to.
Sort of like a mortar itself.
Yeah.
You do it right or you don't do it.
Franklin, did Mackay and Co. Are they certified for this particular type of?
You don't need a certification, but they're long-standing. Yes, they would have gotten.
So I mean,
last
this
program,
is
the 70s.
what,
Yeah, they're long-standing.
the really important
just
thing
need
is to be able to
somebody
find somebody you can rely on.
Yeah.
And this was the
Get a
sustainability project actually introduced us to Jane and introduced us to Franklin, and then Franklin has guys, he's reliable, he has guys that are reliable. And so just getting
The O'Reilly brothers.
getting involved with the right people is half the battle to getting this job done properly.
Franklin, which Mackay did this with?
Steve with the basement and
Okay, so we're going to go to Steve's house,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's great.
Oh,
So the person who actually insulated this basement, we're going to go see him.
Art did the upstairs.
Art did the
Okay.
upstairs,
Is-
and Art will be at Tucker House. So there you go.
Perfect. Yeah.
Does anybody have any more questions, or can we move on?
Move on.
Did you do anything with the floor?
No, you can see
Joe
that we
Steve
get
was
slight moisture
Foundation.
coming in because we get these spalling patches on the concrete, but it's never been severe enough to get me worried enough to do anything about it.
Oh, really?
To the attic. Okay, we have this floor, we have the second floor, and we have the end walls of our attic, which we've sort of half finished. We had wall insulation put in, and you guys are really lucky that we haven't actually repainted since we had the work done, because you can see all the spots here that they looked at the outside and they say, nice brickwork, good mortar, don't want to disturb that, so we'll work from the inside. So they basically made, the holes are about this size that they blow the insulation in. They need about a 2-foot interval, both vertically and horizontally. So it's a lot of holes and a lot of painting afterwards. So, if you want to have this done, I think it's a really good thing to have done, but you have to be aware that you're going to have to paint every room that has an external wall afterwards.
What kind of insulation did you have in beforehand?
I don't think there was anything. It's a cavity wall, obviously, or we wouldn't be able to blow anything in. But
Generally in those walls, they could have used paper, or they could have used bark or shavings, things like that in the 1930s. That's probably what they did if they did anything.
I'm wondering
Yes.
if that would have impeded the insulation being blown in.
No, because gravity does its work.
Okay.
So everything will have settled at the bottom,
Yeah.
and we will have been able to get it to go in. Nobody mentioned that there was a problem getting the stuff in, so I'm assuming that the walls were mostly empty by the time that they did this work.
Franklin, as an energy advisor, when you do the energy audit and you're checking for wall insulation levels, and I'm speaking only from my own experience, I have a 50s home and I was concerned, and there was no room to blow in additional insulation is what I was told, so we had, I guess, sufficient, but that's something that you would check during.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're drilling holes in the wall.
Although in some older houses it's difficult, you would assume, because in older houses often there wouldn't be any outlets. We go through the outlets
Right.
with a knitting needle to find out where the, if it's insulated or not, and often in older houses there aren't any outlets on the exterior walls. So, we would make a guess and then get a good contractor like Art to come in and maybe drill a hole or put his borescope out somewhere in you know, in an inconspicuous area
Yes.
to see.
I have a question. What do you do if it's a removal of replacement of external siding? Would you then insulate with foam panels, or what?
Yeah,
That's another option for sure.
Yeah,
If
on
you
the
wanna make
outside
sure that
too,
you're-
would you? You just go on the outside and leave the fiberglass inside, or would you take all that out as well?
Oh, it depends what you have. If there's in a lot of older homes, you'll have if there's any insulation at all, you'll often have a fiberglass that's thinner than the wall cavity. So
Yes, it's a 70s home, so it's
that's
probably
problematic to me.
2.5 or something, yeah.
So I would recommend removing it, or from the outside, you might try to dense pack your wall cavities with cellulose in that case.
But would you put fiberglass back in and then
I would never put fiberglass in, no, personally, but
just
I
put
would
in,
use
put in
cellulose.
foam?
Cellulose.
Spray foam?
This has got blown cellulose in it.
Oh, okay.
That's what I would use if I have a
It's
cavity.
fire-treated, retardant treated paper, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and borate. I think they use.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's locally made, I think, isn't it,
Yeah,
Franklin?
absolutely.
Yeah, so.
So you can get fire retardants that aren't poisonous?
Well, you better ask Gemma. She's the expert on borates, I would say.
Well, I would say that borates are chemicals that don't evaporate. They're inorganic chemicals. The ones you have to worry about are ones that you can breathe in. So these are mainly organic chemicals. So if you have something like the foam downstairs, it may off-gas, as Franklin said, for 24 hours, but by that time all the gaseous stuff is gone, so there shouldn't be anything for you to inhale. And for the borate, boron is not one of the more poisonous elements, and I think that's probably okay. But put it this way, it's not going to evaporate and come out of the wall, so you don't have to worry about that. So, Franklin, I quick look at your report. You didn't actually estimate what R value we were adding here. Do you have any kind of feeling for that, or is it just not something you can calculate?
Well, in the program we use, modeling software, it usually goes from about an R5 to an R15 when you add cellulose.
Okay, so
To a
it
brick
depends
exterior.
a bit on the structure of the wall itself.
Yeah,
Does
it does. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So you have vinyl siding, and you're not going to have, it's not quite as, the insulation value is a fair amount lower than brick. And then also the sheeting that you have on your house as well, and so on and so forth, right? So it's like, you mean on the inside of here, it's going to be a lot of plaster instead of, gypsum. So once again, there's a little bit more insulation. I mean, it's pretty much negligible though. But yeah, and also this is, what era is this house?
30s.
30s,
39
yeah.
it was built,
So we might even have rough cut 2x4, so that's even a slightly larger cavity to fill. So the software takes all that into account, which is one of the nice things about the HOT 2000 program that we use. So it's not only going to say, okay, well, this is not a 3.5 inch 2x4, it's actually a full 4 inches.
Okay.
And so it's going to fill that up in the program with the blown cellulose, and then it's going to give you the estimated energy savings as well too.
Okay. So actually I'm glad you mentioned energy savings, and this is sort of applies to the whole house, including all the stuff we see in the attic.
Thanks to Jane Thompson's sustainability program, I was collecting data on our gas and electricity use from December 2009. So I actually have 3 years worth of data, just December to February I used to check the winter usage of gas. And based on that, found very similar usage in 2009, 2010, 2010, 2011. And then in March 2011, Franklin did all of his work. And over the past winter, again, December to February data, we're seeing a 40% decrease over the previous 2 years. Now, admittedly, last winter was quite a mild winter, so I would say probably 10% of that anyways is due to the winter just being mild, I'm afraid. Does anybody here have, I know they create statistics over for the warmth of the winter, but I just don't have them. No. But let's say even if 10% of that decrease was due to the warmer winter, we're still getting a substantial improvement over the previous 2
but
winters.
I think the really warm part was after. I'm surprised you stopped in February, but it got very warm in March.
That was one of the reasons I didn't include the March data was because in March 2011 all this work was actually being done.
Right.
So I think that would have skewed, and the doors were open, and holes in the walls. So and this March, I included the March data and it did show, an even bigger improvement if you include March, because March this year was like summertime, summer fell in March this year. So, yeah. I can show you also our gas bill from Enbridge. That actually, okay, they do, every alternate month is estimated, and the ones in between are real data. And so the winter months here, you can see, okay, these are the estimated ones. They said it was going to be the same as previous year, and because this is too high, you get really low. So these two are showing, significant drops in the gas usage. This data is pretty much compatible with the calculations that I did based on actually looking at the gas meter on a monthly basis. You can see from the construction, we have a triangular roof space, and we have the ceiling coming down with the angle there, and then another wall. So in the actual ceiling space, we have above here, we have behind that, which is directly behind the roof, and then we have in the triangle down there that needs to be insulated. And we have a lot more bat insulation. I think was it just yellow bats that they put in there, or were they?
There were some bats added to the knee walls here, and to the joist cavities beneath the knee walls.
Yeah, we already had some insulation that we got with a CMHC grant in the 1980s, but it was fairly inadequate and quite old at the time. Yeah. So a lot more insulation there, and behind that slanting section, between it and the actual roof, that I think was very difficult to actually stuff the bats into, and it was a relatively small space anyway.
Yeah, you had a lot of air leakage in this area because of the wood, and the clients didn't want to change the look of the area, so we caulked every crack in the wood here.
It was that was the air leakage side. So, so that was it was, as Franklin said, it was two-stage. One was getting a whole lot of insulation behind the walls there and on the rafters. The other part, because we wanted to keep the wood, it looks nice, I love wood, but the mortise and tenon joints leak like sieves. And Franklin's blower door exercise showed that the air was coming straight out up here and going out into the roof space, and then of course we've got soffit vents, so it's easy to get out from there. So this was and you can see everywhere you look, every joint in the wood, in the ceiling space, in that slanting bit there, down to there, and even one or two of the floor joints has been caulked individually. It took 3 days.
No. So here in the slopes we put a baffle behind for the ventilation, and then we dense packed the slopes. That was our decision. We hummed and hawed for quite a while over what to do in the slopes, Gemma, and then we decided to put a baffle and dense pack it with cellulose. And we added cellulose to the attic.
So when you say a baffle, what you mean is you put something at the bottom to stop it running out the bottom, and then you just ran in the cellulose from the top and filled up the spaces.
Well, it's a piece of styrofoam,
U-shaped sort of.
Yeah, that goes up behind against the roof deck here, and then to allow the air to come up from the ventilated knee wall area into the ventilated attic, and then we blew cellulose down from the attic. We stuffed the bottom of the slope here, and then we blew cellulose down to fill the cavity. There was already fiberglass here, but you could see that it was doing nothing because from the outside you could see how the
the first alert that we received was when one of the Mackay brothers came past, and this was in February because your audit was at the end of February. And he says, geez, you've got this problem with your roof. Is it halfway down the roof? There's this line of shingles that you can see where it's melted. And that's right behind this section.
Is this house balloon framed? Or is it sand?
I suspect so. We never figured it out, but I suspect it is, yeah.
It's quite possible. A lot of the times, though, even if it's balloon frame, they have fire stops.
That's what I'm asking.
And notice downstairs that they had blown insulation done, and the holes were downstairs on the main level.
Okay.
So, generally speaking, they'd probably start on the second level to see if it's balloon framed, and they'd see the cavity. And it probably didn't fall all the way down, so they probably had to do it in 2 stages. The other thing about the roof system is you always want to have a hot ceiling, or you want to have a cold roof. So that's why you have the baffles, right? The baffles keeps your roof cold, and then you have the insulation underneath the baffle, so you can keep your ceiling hot.
Question, Gemma, I know you had your neighbors somehow take part in the program.
This was, they had an audit done independently by somebody.
Enviro Center.
It was by Enviro Center, okay. And their house was very strange when we first visited there because it's an absolute complete mirror image of ours. It's like seeing backwards.
Sure.
Anyway, one difference was that they had children, and they fitted up their attic for bedrooms for the children, and they do not have wood, they have drywall up there. And in their case, there was no requirement to do anything to the attic. What was recommended to them was to replace their windows, which they were quite happy to do because they didn't like dealing with the storm windows, which, we keep our storm windows in except for 1 or 2 that we remove for ventilation for most of the summer. And Franklin's blower door study suggested, maybe in a later phase the windows might be something you target, but initially the main place where the air was going out was through all these walls up here, which the neighbours don't have. So their house, although it was really very similar, it was built together, obviously.
The reason I ask is I know we work on some insulation programs where we do row housing, and we'll do attic insulation, and you can literally tell by looking at the outside of the house which units have had insulation and which units haven't. So it's just kind of funny if you, in the winter time, I was just wondering if you ever noticed, you had a lot of snow on your side and they didn't.
We did. We insulated their house.
Great. Okay.
We did the walls in the basement at the same time.
And that obviously makes a difference. I mean, when you've got an adjoined unit like this with the roof, I would say it would be better, wouldn't it, if both units were participating?
They wouldn't have
for the lifetime of the roof,
It's unusual.
Is there a shared attic? It's shared attic.
So there's no fire break up there.
There is no fire break. I guess there wasn't a requirement for that in 1939.
That's a relatively modern concept.
Probably a good one, but not that we've had any worries on that score to date. But
you can always visit too. That way.
Just hope they don't get any raccoons in their attic. Okay, does anybody have any more questions?
Yes, the caulking, it's quite smear free. Was that talent or can
Talent.
Definitely talent.
So it's not that it's
Definitely
an easy, clean job.
Yeah, well, it's latex. It's acrylic caulking that's water soluble too. I mean, so you just go about it carefully. And there's a few. I can see a smear.
There's a couple
here.
Did you use caulking guns?
If it's transparent cork, then you know you need to see the light shining on them to see them. So.
Was it caulking guns you used, or was there a machine?
No.
Okay.
It's all handwork. Yeah.
All right.
It was a lot of work. Yeah.
So the spacing here at the slope, there's about maybe an inch or so of air for the baffle, and then an inch or so of the insulation, or so. Like
no, you have I forget. I think it was a rough 2x4 here.
Okay.
So you have.
Yeah,
you had at least 3 inches. So you're.
Because you don't have much to work with. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
With the amount of insulation to put in.
Yeah, well, it's I forget exactly, but I think it was. I'm not sure if it was a 2x6, but it was at least a. It was at least a rough 2x4. So there was plenty of room. There's at least 3 inches of insulation there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's cellulose is about R3.5 or so when it's properly dense packed per inch. So it's not too bad. I mean. It was a tough decision here. Yeah. Ideally, you'd like spray foams, urethane foam, the same as what you had in the basement, without the fire coating. Ideally, is what you'd want to do, but there was no option to do that here.
Yeah, you have to take everything down to do that, right?
Yeah. So we had to retrofit it here.
So this is a picture of what we started with at the back. So it was original to the house or close to it.
It was original to the house, and it was definitely in a state of disrepair. And it was not, the upper part was not insulated. The windows were small. It felt cramped. It just we never used it.
So what we looked at here was usually we start with the bigger picture and then we move to the smaller details. So the clients wanted a sunroom. First we made sure that it was on the right side of the house. So this is south facing. We have seen sunrooms that go on the north side and they're cold and they're not very sunny. So first you make sure what the objectives match the location. And then we did a series of sun studies, and this is March, September, so we did it for each, the 3 different seasons of the year. So March, September are the same, the intermediate seasons, the summer and the winter. And what we looked at was how would this building be shaded by the adjacent buildings, and then how much sun would come in through the windows. And at the beginning of the project, we were also considering solar panels on the roof as well. So we were looking at how could we create the roof so that there was panels in the right location, and how much sun would they receive. So as a result of doing those studies, we then looked at it in sections. So that would be cutting through the building this way. And we looked at different lengths of overhangs and sizes of windows and heights of windows. And the objective was to let as much sun in as possible in the winter through the windows, so that would be a free source of heating, but keep as much out as we could. And so we looked at, you probably noticed on the way in, these are really large overhangs. So we looked at a more traditional 2-foot overhang. These are 3 feet. And what we found was when the overhangs went out to 3 feet, then it blocked all of the sun in the hottest day of the year and still let all of the sun in the coldest, and then so it moderated between that. And I think we've heard from Gemma that's worked really well.
It's now getting to the point where it's a little difficult to use my computer if I'm sitting facing the interior at midday, but in the summer it was fine.
How long did the study take, Jane? I'm just wondering, as far as for the sun study goes, I mean,
there's sun tables, so they just show where the sun is, and the height, and the location. So just takes us a couple hours on the computer just to model that, and then we try a couple different variations till it works out.
So are you saying that the 3-foot overhang could do the work of blinds, say, in terms of solar gain and keeping it out?
Well, if you can keep the sun out before it gets inside, that's much better, because once it comes in, it's already heated the room. It's just that the blinds are keeping it between the window and the blind, and you're not getting as much direct sunlight. So the first objective is always to try to keep unwanted sun out from the outside so that the heat hasn't entered your space.
But what about in the winter then? The reverse is you want the sun to come in, don't you?
You do.
You do?
Now that we're designing buildings that are really airtight, I've created one where I put a lot of south-facing windows, and there was a day last year where it was minus 25 and sunny outside, and it was 25 inside with no heating. So it's amazing what the sun can do if the heat gets let in and then it gets held in by the building. So you have to be careful that it is possible to get too much sun and heat in the winter if you have a lot of glazing. So blinds are definitely a good secondary measure. Sometimes we'll put a trellis on the outside or plantings. Plantings work really well like vines because in the summer when you don't want the extra heat, they've got the leaves on that keep out the sun, and then those fall off, and it's a really good natural way of controlling sunlight.
Jane, would a conservatory be completely different? Or
with a glass roof, do you mean? Or
well, I suppose, would you have to have a glass roof for a conservatory?
I think that's the difference in
definition.
Definition of
conservatory is something
I've
pretty much like a
seen them
greenhouse.
with, well, yeah. The glass roofs are such a problem though.
Yeah, they let a lot of heat and cold out, and they tend to leak. I have done some that have worked well, but it's a challenging. It's kind of pushing your luck a little bit.
Jane, one of the things that we took care of, again, based on our experience with the rest of the house, was to make sure there was proper insulation everywhere that there could be, and to get really good quality windows to sort of help with the whole business. And it was completed just before Christmas last year, and we were away for Christmas. We arrived back on the 28th of December, and we moved straight in here.
Right.
And after playing with the little convection heater that's behind our photographer there, we set back to 14 degrees overnight in winter and had it set at 21 degrees. It's thermostated there. And for much of last winter, we were able to come out and have breakfast here. And on the days that it went below minus 15 at night, we could have lunch out here if we wanted, but it was a little cool in the morning. And then in our really hot summer, when it was out at 35 degrees in the backyard, it never got above 28 that I saw on that thermostat readout.
Great.
It was actually quite comfortable in here, even with the blazing midday sun coming down and 35 degrees out there. So we're actually really impressed by its livability, the kind of climate we have. It has to cope with both heat in summer and cold in winter, and it's doing really well.
So you don't have an air conditioner?
We thought, we replaced our window air conditioners with these little ones that roll around on wheels a couple of years ago, and we saw a really small one. We thought we could park it in here. We never actually went out and bought one last year. We didn't feel we needed it.
Okay. Well, the ceiling fan, I'm sure.
The ceiling fan helps.
Both in the winter
and keeps a bit of...
Every one of these windows opens, so
right.
you can at the top and the bottom.
So we can
be like a screen porch with the air moving right through. I'll just...
the windows are argon filled.
Argon, they're argon, which are known for, especially for their double hungs, for really energy efficient windows.
What was the brand name?
Marvin.
Don't know.
I'll just talk a little bit about how we insulated the building, because that's one of the, making sure it's airtight and well insulated is important, and you have more opportunities when it's something new than when you're retrofitting, so we want to make sure we do this so somebody doesn't have to retrofit later. So underneath, I think you saw that it's an insulated space and it's heated. So instead of trying to insulate the floor, we insulate the wall, and it works and keep it at a low level of heat below, and that works so much better, because if you have an unheated space below, your floor is always going to feel cold. You put a lot of insulation in it, so this is a much more comfortable, energy efficient way of doing it. So we have the insulation right down the walls, and then in this space, because so much of it is windows, it's really important to get good windows, and then it's important to install them well. And there's so little insulated wall area in this room, you can see, compared to the amount of windows, and there's a lot of wood framing. This, for example, is a wood post in here, and you can't insulate that the way you can a wall. So what we did was use an isonine spray foam, which is a water-based foam, to seal the gap between all of the windows, the gap between each of the pieces of wood, and then the space down below where the joists meet in, which is really difficult to insulate. What it does is it seals to every piece, so you get a continuous level of insulation and also a seal. So we did that in the framing, and then we also put a 1.5-inch iso board on the outside, which is a rigid insulation, and it acts as a blanket, so it just wraps. So all the weak spots where you have a lot of wood in the wall, it wraps over top of that, so it means that you've got kind of a second cover on the outside that makes the insulation as continuous as possible. We continue the same thing up into the roof, and then we have our 50 of cellulose.
Can I ask you,
Maybe that explains why it's so
you looked at getting solar panels but decided not to. Was it for cost or was it?
The way solar panels work, you have quite a lot of infrastructure. You have to have this inverter that takes what the solar panels produce and converts it into electricity, and then you have something that you're linked to the grid. You're looking at the amount of money that you have to spend for this infrastructure. The guys that we talked to said you need at least 10 solar panels to create enough electricity to pay for all of your infrastructure capital cost in a reasonable time frame. And he said you can only get 3 up there, so don't bother.
Yeah, that was my conclusion.
Can I ask how much this cost? And like these windows are beautiful, and in my house I'm starting to ask for assistance to even close the window.
This is a bit of a Cadillac project, because we're both retired and we thought we'd spend a bit more time out here. Also, I used to do mold remediation, so I said I'm not having an earth crawl space underneath this. We're going to have it concreted over. So we have really good foundation. And we wanted it to be like at least a 3-season, and it's practically a 4-season. It costs, including taxes, between $80,000 and $90,000. So this includes demolition of the old thing, digging of the foundation, which wasn't trivial. You can see that nice rock out there. That rock came from right underneath where I'm standing. and then they hit bedrock underneath. So it was demolition, construction, and then, as Jane has said, all the special features that make it into at least a 3.5-season sunroom. They don't come for nothing. You have to pay to get things done properly, and you have to pay to get good windows that are actually going to give you light while keeping out the heat and cold.
How much does one of these windows cost?
These are very, for the quality of the window and the energy efficiency, they're less than, they're kind of your standard mid-range wood aluminum clad windows. So this is their specialty. So Marvin windows, which these ones are very expensive for certain ones, but their double hung is right in the middle of the market, and they're so much more energy efficient. So you get a really good window here without actually paying. It's a little bit more than a mid-grade vinyl window, but it's about the same price as a high-end.
We haven't been window shopping yet, so that...
So I definitely recommend, especially if you're using double hung windows, Marvin's a really good deal.
The top-down business, the bottom-up, top-down. So
sometimes, if there's a breeze, you don't want all your papers. The insulating, I think this was an expensive project because it had a lot of windows, and it's a very small addition. The smaller the addition, the more cost per square foot. So the energy upgrades were probably, I don't think we didn't pay anything really extra than we would have on the windows, and the putting a slightly more expensive insulation, because there was very little of it, was maybe $1,000, $2,000. So I'd say the energy efficiency part of this upgrade wasn't much. It was more the fact that there was a lot of windows. It was a small, complicated little area, there was quite a bit of work on the second floor too, because there used to be that porch that had to be removed.
Because there was a door that came out into the second floor, and that had to be replaced by a window, and we had to get extra brickwork. We used to have the duct from above our stove coming out. You can see there's new brickwork there. It just came straight out the wall, and we had to have that sort of go up into the ceiling space and up through the roof there. So there were, and then
Could you describe the foundation again? You have concrete and then insulation and then the subfloor?
there's insulation outside of the concrete structure. Is there not?
So on the floor, we always put a vapor barrier down, which is really important for
But what's
moisture.
on the bottom? Is it a concrete slab?
So, yes, so I'm starting at the very bottom and go, so yeah, so there's a vapor barrier, there's rigid insulation. This is also on the ground, you excavate and you put in your
On the
fill.
on the earth.
On the bedrock.
Oh, okay.
And so then there's a vapor barrier and there's R10 of insulation,
Yes.
the cold, and then there's a concrete slab.
Oh.
And then on the walls, there's, do we use the insulated concrete forms on this one? I don't know if you know about those. There are some-
I remember
SEF,
seeing
yeah.
it. I remember
Yes.
seeing insulation.
So, it's a very clever idea somebody came up with, and usually
You
the
just
plywood
pour the
forms.
concrete inside the
Yeah, so you've
form.
got 2.5 inches of rigid insulation on either side, and
Yeah.
only 6 inches of concrete.
Yeah.
And you don't have to use plywood forms, put them in and then take them out again. That is your form as well as your insulation, and then you can just attach your drywall surface right to that.
And wiring is not a problem with that sort of
They
thing?
just cut the thin wires through the foam
Oh, yeah.
and then seal around all of those.
And the concrete on top of the insulation doesn't compress it? I mean, how does it?
No, it's designed of a suitable strength. There's, if you're doing a garage, something that people are going to be driving on, there's this particular type of insulation that has an even higher strength, but it is designed to take the loads.
It's also because like you're gonna have fill underneath the insulation, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like if you had like a piece of styrofoam here, a piece of styrofoam here, and nothing underneath it, you could easily crack it in half. But there's it's firmly supported underneath, and then you're gonna
Gravel
like,
and pea stone or whatever.
yeah, exactly. And then on
stone
top
dust
is
or-
going to be a consistent concrete slab, and then all that slab is just going to take all the weight and distribute it super evenly. So it's not going to cause any sort of problems to the insulation.
You need about 2 inches of concrete or?
2 inches is probably going to be
3 is a minimum.
Yeah.
4.
Otherwise you get
Yeah,
percolation coming
a
up
little bit
through
more
it.
than that.
Right.
What was the cost for all of the retrofitting minus the addition?
Okay, Franklin's costs for the audit, all the improvement of insulation there, it was $10,000 plus tax.
Gee, that's cheap.
And the grants at the time were
But-
almost half of that.
That
right?
includes the insulation in the basement, all the concrete, and the insulation on
I'm
the
trying to think. Okay.
Foam insulation is
The insulation downstairs was, between 2,000 and 3,000. The walls ditto. The attic work ditto, and then there was a fee to pay to the Environment Centre and the audits themselves.
Gemma, thank you so much.
Yes, very much.
It's been great.